Sometimes there are scenes that are so emotional and intense that the actors themselves end up losing control. So much so that these scenes end up staying in the movie, not as bloopers, but as actual final cut scenes. Whether it be on-set events or personal trauma with the actors, these individuals and their reactions are as real as they get. Today, we're going to be going through some of the most memorable moments where the actors or actresses completely went off script, or moments where reactions that we see are completely real and unedited. Forgetting movie magic, some of these are completely crazy, so you're going to want to stick around to the very end. But before we do, be sure to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with the latest videos. All the support is always appreciated, so without further ado, let's get started. Starting off this list, we have Martin Sheen's breakdown in Apocalypse Now. During one of the earlier scenes of this Vietnam War epic, we see Sheen's character acting erratic and having a full-blown mental breakdown in his hotel room. He breaks his hand on a mirror, downs a bottle of alcohol, and is in a complete trance. It was later revealed that he was not actually acting in the scene. Martin Sheen was genuinely drunk out of his mind, and his breakdown is completely real. Legend has it that prior to filming this particular scene, Sheen's wife had told him that she wanted to divorce him. Mixed in with the extreme drug-heavy antics on the set, pushed Sheen to tell director Francis Coppola to just film him and to not cut no matter what. And that's exactly what happened. Sheen breaking his hand on the mirror and rubbing the blood all over himself is completely real and unedited. But if you know anything about this movie and what happened behind the scenes, this is pretty unsurprising. Speaking of glass breaking, this is a great segue into our next entry, 2015's based on a true story drama, Foxcatcher, starring Steve Carell and Channing Tatum, among others. There's a scene where Tatum has just lost a crucial wrestling match and is sobbing over his loss in his hotel room. He slaps himself, then begins punching himself in the face before shoving his head into a mirror in the room, which takes multiple slams to fully break. Both the punches and the mirror slam are completely real. Not only that, but it was also completely improvised and not in the script. Right after the camera cuts, we see him sobbing at the edge of the bed, and we're guessing in between these scenes there was a mad dash to get the medics. Props to Tatum for fully immersing himself in the role, blood, sweat, and tears, literally. Heading to the small screen, we have Bryan Cranston's emotional breakdown in Breaking Bad. In one of the pivotal scenes in season 2 of the show, Jesse's girlfriend, played by Kristen Ritter, is seen suffering from an overdose. Walter White looks down at her as she is dying, and in an interview, Cranston recalled thinking of his daughter during this scene and imagined that happening to her. This conjured up the real emotions and tears needed for the scene. I know many actors can cry on command, but Cranston really got into his feelings with this one, and you can truly tell, as it doesn't get any more real than this. This next one isn't really a freak out per se, but it's definitely worth mentioning on this list. In Quentin Tarantino's western, The Hateful Eight, there's a scene where Kurt Russell is seen grabbing a guitar from Jennifer Leigh's character and breaking it up against a pole. It turns out that this very guitar was actually a 145-year-old antique guitar not to be broken. Kurt Russell did not know this at the time, but his co-star did. Jennifer's reaction in the scene is completely real as she gasps and immediately looks off camera out of concern. She says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa," without context, and it seems like any other scene, but when you add in the fact that he broke an antique guitar, it makes the whole thing a lot more cringy, and her reaction is completely real. Next up, we have Mia Goth's unsettling stare at the end of Pearl. Mini spoiler alert here, so if you haven't seen the movie, skip this part and go watch it. It's actually a great horror movie. But so at the end of Pearl, the title character stares at the camera unnervingly for an uncomfortable amount of time before the credits begin to roll. The infamous ending lasts quite a long time, to the point where Mia Goth's eyes actually begin to water as she's trying to hold this really creepy smile. The tears are completely real, and legend has it that it was not in the script. Director Ty West kept the camera rolling and Goth just went with it, creating an iconic and completely unsettling end to a great horror flick. Truly creepy. Up next, we have not an actor, but a crew member. It all started during the filming of Requiem for a Dream, one of the most intense movies about drugs ever made, and just one of the darkest, most depressing movies ever made, in my opinion. It's bleak and depressing, story matter is gut-wrenching. During Ellen Burstyn's impassioned monologue about how it feels to be old, cinematographer Matthew Libatique accidentally let the camera drift off target, and when director Aronofsky called cut and confronted him about it, he realized the reason he had let the camera drift was because he had been crying during the take and fogged up the camera's eyepiece. This was the take that would be eventually used in the final print. Next up, we have Matt Damon's real reaction at the end of The Martian. To give context, there's a scene where Matt Damon's character is being launched out of Mars after being stranded alone for weeks. At the time of shooting the scene, the filming for the rest of the cast had already wrapped up months prior. So when Ridley Scott played the actors' voices over the headset, Damon actually got extremely emotional, and thus in the final cut of the movie, you can see Damon actually crying real tears. Staying on the topic of space, we fly over to the set of Alien, another Ridley Scott movie. It's one of the most iconic sci-fi horror flicks of all time, and one of the most memorable and ahead of its time scenes is the classic chest burster scene. The actors were kept away from John Hurt while he was getting set up as the victim of the chest burster, so they had no idea that the scene would be as visceral and crazy as it was. Veronica Cartwright having a full-on panic attack, and her fainting was 100% legit. You can hear her saying "oh god" off camera if you listen carefully, and this was also a real reaction. Her co-star also locked himself in his dressing room for a full day afterwards. The reactions and scares are as iconic as you can possibly get, and what better way to sell fear than to get actual reactions of fear, so once again, well played Ridley. Moving on, we head over to the animated space, proving that you don't have to particularly show your face to break character or go off script. In the show Archer, one of the most prominent characters was voiced by Jessica Walters, who sadly ended up passing away in 2021. As a send-off, John Benjamin, the voice of Archer, read the final note from his mom as Sterling Archer, who was played by Jessica Walters. You can hear the quiver in his voice at the end, and it's because he's actually saying goodbye to his friend in real life, and it's completely real emotion. Knowing that the show placed her character with her husband, Ron Cadillac, who was voiced by Jessica's real-life husband, Ron Liebman, who had died in 2019, as the send-off to both Mallory and Jessica, is beautiful. The show ends with the two characters sitting on the beach, enjoying a drink.
You, my Sterling, because from wherever I am, I'll be watching over you. Love, Mother.
Next one is a pretty obvious one, and I'm sure you've already heard of it, but it usually does make its way to these kinds of lists. So here we are. Yes, we're talking about Leonardo DiCaprio in Django Unchained. As a ruthless role as Candy, the evil slave owner in the movie, DiCaprio got way into character to the point of actually getting physically injured. In the climax of the movie, we see Django and his companions sitting face to face with the villain, Leo in this case. In the scene, he slams his hand against the table, but in real life, he actually cut his hand on glass and bloodied his entire hand. But in typical movie fashion, the camera just kept rolling under Quentin Tarantino's command. He then proceeded to smear his blood on Kerry Washington's face, and her reaction of repulsion is absolutely real. This is in the final cut of the movie, and you can see it all play out in real time. Next up, we go to another legendary filmmaker, Martin Scorsese, and he's no stranger to asking actors to improvise, and Irishman is no different. One moment in particular stands out an example of how going off script, even in a small way, can deepen the relationship between the characters. Stephen Graham and Al Pacino's characters have a dense dynamic throughout the film, but one moment goes above and beyond. Tension heats up as the two characters insult each other in a prison cafeteria. Graham's character gets to his feet and smacks Hoffa's beloved ice cream sundae off the table before lunging at him. The moment amps up the tension between the two. The dialogue as written is already explosive, but his violent outburst, improvised by Graham, is the cherry on top. He had to say this: "I'd already come up with an idea at home when I was reading through the script. I didn't tell Marty, and I didn't tell Al." Next up, we have the remake of the horror classic hit, It, back in 2017. During a promotional featurette for the film, director Andy Muschietti and the crew kept their young actors away from Bill Skarsgård's Pennywise as long as they could. This was so the film could capture their real reactions to seeing the clown for the first time. The first time turns out to be the infamous projector sequence, which helps explain why the on-screen results feel so real. That's because they were. And finally, rounding off this list, we have a Sylvester Stallone stunt from First Blood. It's an iconic tough guy action movie that everybody loves. And as a result, since he wanted to do his own stunts, in one scene Stallone takes a crazy tumble down a cliff after being chased by police. The fall looks painful, and that's because it was. Sly cracked a rib during the sequence, which saw the actor leap into the path of the tangled tree branches. Thankfully, it wasn't a career ender, and Stallone lived on to make many more great movies. The scream of pain, however, is completely real. And as an honorable mention, obviously, in the thumbnail, you saw Nightcrawler, and that would be Jake Gyllenhaal actually breaking the glass in the scene where he's yelling in a fit of rage. This was not in the script, and the glass actually ended up breaking. So there you go, a little tidbit to carry off the end of the video. Anyways, if you like this content and want to see more, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, and please hit that like button while you're at it. Also, there'll be 2 videos on the screen right now, so make sure to check those out if you're interested. Thank you for all the support, and I'll catch you on the next video.